changing. So welcome back to all of our speakers. We've been joined now by Anne and Nick and Andrew, and Audrey is there too, I think, if you put your camera on, Audrey, and we can have a little Q&A session. If you've got any questions, we've got some already, and we can ask them to the panel. So Audrey, we can't see you, but we can hear you.
It's not allowing me to put on my camera. I'll ask Nicola if she can help.
Okay, no problem. Well, I'll go first to Anne then for some questions. Anne, thank you for your contributions for the Green City Guidelines. And we have a question from the audience for you. It says, according to the Institute for Global Health based in Barcelona, over 60% of the city's public space is for cars, although less than 25% of trips are on them. How will this change in 5 or 10 years if citywide superblocks plan is implemented?
So I don't have an exact answer to in percentage terms about the shift of allocation of space. What the information that's been published so far and what I've discussed first is that within 5 and 10 years, the focus is on the whole citywide plan. It's focusing on the Eixample first, and it will be rolled out later. So within 5 and 10 years, it mostly will be the Eixample that will be the area that was designed following Cerda's plan. The model, there's some assumption that have been made regarding modal shift, reducing car journeys by about 20%. It's estimated that's one of the impacts. That's the assumption they're working with. And the information that has been also published is more in terms of gain within each block and within each squares for pedestrians. Now, I think that around 1,500 of public space is expected to be gained for pedestrians in each street section, in each block where the superblock model is being implemented. And that means a doubling of the current space to achieve some sort of 3,000 square meter of pedestrian space available within each block along the street in total. And within each of the squares that are along the superblock model, there's a space gained at each junction will be around 1,300 square meters. And that amounts to a tripling of the current figure to reach nearly 2,000 square meters. So I don't know if you put it back in the broader context, how much physical space is in percentage terms is taken away from car, but that's the figures I have available.
Okay, no, thank you. That's very good. That's very good. I wonder, what is your reaction of the citizens of Barcelona to the changes?
I think there's a mix of apprehension and concerns in terms of will I be able to use my car? What if I live on one of those streets? And will I be able to use my car for also practical things such as deliveries to shopkeepers? And I think a lot of the practices that as the trials that have been done so far have really helped alleviate those concerns. And also, to a degree, the shift in model from like islands to a grid approach throughout the Eixample is designed to help address those concerns, to help not block access so much, to allow much more fluidity across the blocks. The initial model of the super blocks were a little bit like home zones, where you'd have gates or portals signaling anyone entering, well, you're entering in a special area now. By distributing the designs that were implemented within the superblock across the city without any entry point or exit point, and not making it closed area, will really help with circulation, flow, mobility on one sense, and accessibility to shops and management of deliveries and things like that, allowing for deliveries to happen just around the corner if need be. Or so the adjustment of the model was intending to address some of those concerns. At the same time, there was a massive support for the quality of life it gave for residents and everybody wanting their blocks to become a super block. So I think, yes, there's been a mixture, and I think the adjustments and the transformation that we've seen in the model is a response to some of those public responses.
Great, thank you. And Audrey, it's good that we have you back with us. We have a couple of questions. One of them, if I put both of them to you now, one of them was from the chat about what plans you have for further sharing the contents of the guidelines. And the second one is about the fact that you've mentioned about the more focused case studies for the guidelines for the future. And I wonder what ideas you have for that.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Yes, nice to be back. I was only visible now as well as audio. I'll start with the case studies. So certainly the case studies that we would like to do as focus are really looking at the connection of plants in the use in city greening, and really focusing on the importance of right plant selection that plays in the success of projects. You know, for example, the Bosque Vertical, which is really the selection and the science that went into plant choice for that building to work is really supreme. So we'd really like to showcase that. Looking at the selection plant procurement, how do projects actually access the right plants? You know, and part of this, sometimes it's about on-site production, part of it's about contract production that normally needs a lead up of about 2 years beforehand. But it's really showcasing the fact that it doesn't just happen that the plants suddenly come on site, that there's a process coming into that. And Andrew, you alluded to this too about quality. And some of the practices that happen in nurseries really are of primary importance for bringing on site quality plants that then will perform well on site. So those are some things that we want to do, and there are a number of case studies we've got in mind, but we are looking for more. In connection with looking at really further extending the reach of the Green City Guidelines, some of the ideas we have with that are to set up focused webinars and training sessions that look at particular aspects of the guidelines and then do particular training of those. Ideal webinars that focus on a particular part of the guidelines, a particular aspect of city greening, and then bring in speakers to talk about that, to take what we've got in the guidelines as the foundation information and bring it more into life and into practice. So just a few things of ideas that we've got. The guidelines are a useful resource. We want to make sure that they are widely known and widely used. Okay,
thanks, Audrey. Niek, thank you for your presentation. We have a question from the audience about that. It's from Host City. Great to hear your talk about legacy planning so far ahead. 45 years is a long time. How easy or hard is it to get government or local authorities to understand the value of such long-term return on investment?
When I was talking about legacy, I was talking about the legacy of an expo, and this special legacy that was in 1982. I'm very happy that every tree is still there. So that is one of the legacies. And for me, it's important when you organize an expo, what will be the legacy. But nevertheless, when you talk about green, it is not so difficult to emphasize the importance of a city park. And finally, when it is there, it mostly will stay there also. If you compare, for example, how many years a family, a person is living in a house, the average is 5 till 20 years. How long is a house in a city? How long will it be there? 50 till 100 years. But if you look at city parks, it's still after 100 and 200 years, it's still there. For example, the Vondelpark in the Netherlands, 150 years old, more than. Central Park in New York, I think also between 150 and 200 years old. So the green structures which we make, which we design, are long-term projects. And you invest, of course, in green, but if you do it in the right way, you will have on a very long period benefit of it. So what I see, for example, with our projects in China, that the city government always start now with in a new town with designing and constructing a green structure. That's what they ask us. Starting with green structures, see how important it is also for the developers, and also see how the value of the developed areas is rising because of that green structure. So my experience is that it was not too difficult to talk about investments in green. Only you have to do it in the right way. You have to know the right varieties of plants. You have to know the right combinations, the balance. More or less the things we wrote 20 years ago or 50 years ago in the Green City Guidelines. And it is very interesting to see that the first guidelines are still used in countries to help it really as a guideline to develop new towns. So I think this kind of information is very important for developers, but also for decision makers in cities.
Yeah, thank you. And the creation of the arboretum and the landscape you're creating at the Floriada will create a really special legacy for the city of Almere into the future, with the range, the diversity, and the sort of innovation that has gone into that planting.
Exactly, but it is also an opportunity, what we were talking before, about the varieties of plants, the knowledge. I think now it's very important. Each city will be different. Each climate area is different. Each soil is different. So you cannot use all the same plants, but you have to choose the right plants on the right spot, also because of the function of the plants. And that's what we're going to show in the Arboretum. There are 650 different varieties of trees, all trees which benefit to the green and healthy city. So people can learn about it by visiting that Arboretum, by visiting that city. It is a green city. It's a green city of the future. You mentioned it, but it is also an expo. So you can also enjoy the green and learn about the green.
Thank you. And I wonder, from your international experience, where is there a part of the world where you would point us to first, of saying this is the place you should look for the best examples of green city innovation?
Now the Netherlands, of course. Start there.
I asked for that one.
Maybe next year in Almere, you have a very nice opportunity and also a very nice day. Now, I've been in many countries, and I have projects made in many countries. But I have to say that I was surprised by the opportunities we got we had in China. I did not expect it, but after several years, and I worked altogether for 20 years now in China, the green structures in new towns which we made, and the vision also from some leaders of cities in China, gave us a huge opportunity to make beautiful green structures in the right way, just before the development started, just before the buildings activity started. So the moment the new citizens came there, the green was already there. It was already growing. So I know there are examples of ghost towns, and there are all kind of this kind of, I know, but I can show you a lot of examples of green towns in China, and that they did it on the right way.
Great, yeah, thank you. And Andrew, really appreciated your presentation to show the depth of information we can gain from different species. I think it highlights the fact that we need to constantly get better at making it easier for those who are using plants and trees as part of their solution to functional problems to be able to make the right selections. And clearly the steps you've taken in producing the documents you have is a step in that direction. But if you are involved in construction, it can be quite easy to select an insulation block, for example, based on some certain criteria and equations, and it's all a bit more complicated when you have to do it with plants. And I wonder, what is the next stage? What is the next stage in the research in what needs to be published to make it easier for the specifiers of landscape and city greening to find it easier to prescribe, to procure the correct tree, the correct plant for the right situation?
Well, thanks, Tim. Yeah, I mean, that's a big question, really, isn't it? I think in terms of my point of view, there are a number of different other plant traits and characteristics which we can evaluate. And I think what we need to try and do is to make sure that it doesn't stay within the academic realm, that actually there is effort given to the translation of some of that research for plant users. And I think that is quite important, because otherwise, the right people just don't have access to that sort of information. So there's that sort of translation, and of course there's lots of other traits that could be important. I think also using big data from global distribution of plants and climate to understand the species ranges, the range of climates that species come from, and then to perhaps even be able to target particular portions of a species range for our urban environments. I mean, I noted those two maple cultivars that were from the westernmost range, westernmost natural range, which is the drier portion of their range, and how we can, well, we now have evidence that they are more drought tolerant. But unfortunately, most of the information on horticultural varieties is totally lost in terms of their provenance, their ecotypes. We've got no idea where these things have come from, and so there may be some species that at the moment, the cultivars that we have in production are just from the wrong provenance, from the wrong ecotypes, and that there are really good opportunities to collect from other ranges. So there's, I think it's a combination of more work along the kind of the nitty-gritty physiological traits and morphological anatomical traits, perhaps, that give us meaningful information on the plant personality. The big data sets that are now available that can be crunched in interesting ways, so that we understand, the range in which plants, occupy in terms of their natural distribution, coupled with modeled scenarios of climate, future projections for cities, like London being more closely to Barcelona, that sort of thing. And then that translation will work so that it's not just kept within a kind of academic realm, but it's really made accessible to plant users in their workflows, so that their selection decisions can be based, and then that can feed into procurement and so on. And I mean, some of the things that Audrey touched on really resonated with me as well. That whole supply chain issue, absolutely critical, and understanding that it doesn't matter if it can be a fantastic species, absolutely appropriate for the site, but if you botch the rooting environment up, then it will also fail. If you don't handle the plant correctly, it's left out, with bare roots, for half a day at the planting site. It can be the right species, it can be a brilliant rooting environment, but that simple handling error can massively increase the vulnerability to failure. So it has to be a kind of whole system approach.
Great, yeah, thank you. And I'm sure there's an important role for the industry to help in that translation approach, and the best answer from any researcher is you need more research, of course. So
Of course, yeah.
there'll be some more to come, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you very much to all of the panel for joining and answering those questions, and for your presentations, and especially for your contributions for the guidelines, whether it's a long time ago or more recently. We really appreciate it, and thank you very much for joining us.